Shalom everyone, Debbie G here with the brand new End Time Prophecy channel on YouTube, and this is part 1 of our study about the millennium, particularly about the fact that there is not going to be 1,000-year peace on earth. Now I know this might sound crazy because the majority of Christianity, Messianics, and Jews, they teach that there's the second coming of Yeshua will be like 1,000-year peace on earth. There's going to be a third temple. There's going to be new sacrifices. Let's see. And Yeshua will reign with the believers who have received an immortal body because of the first resurrection, and also of some unbelievers who somehow survived the great tribulation and the wrath of God. And they teach that there will be, like I said, sacrifices again. And they teach these things based upon certain scriptures taken out of context. But if this is not true, then what is? There's also a small group that teach that there's not 1,000-year reign at all. They say Revelation 20 shouldn't be there. You know, that's what some teach. And some teach that only verse 5, Revelation 20 verse 5 shouldn't be in there because apparently verse 5 somehow is not in the Aramaic version of the Bible. And so they say it doesn't deal with 1,000 years. This last group who teach there's not going to be 1,000-year at all, they teach that when Yeshua comes back, we will go to heaven straight away. And actually they teach we do not go to heaven. We will be here straight away and everyone will get their judgment, the good, the bad, the ugly, blah, blah, blah. The thing is, if you believe that, you kind of forget certain questions like Jesus saying things like, when I go to prepare a house for you guys. He says that we're going to address that first, by the way. He says, in heaven, we will not marry, but we will be like angels. So we will receive a heavenly body, which we can read in Luke 20. And there's all the other verses that deal with the second coming. We see, for instance, that when Yeshua comes back, he comes with the angels, all of the angels. Where does that leave the Father? And if you read the book of Revelation carefully, if you read Revelation 19, you will see that the rest of the wicked will die when Yeshua returns. So, again, and then of course there are the verses of Zechariah and Ezekiel, and all these questions I'm gonna try to answer along the way. So stick to part 2 and 3 because this part 1 is actually just an introduction about Revelation 20 and what's in there and what is not in there. So if you haven't read the book of Revelation, this is your time to read it. Go click pause and read the book of Revelation. If you don't want to read the entire book of Revelation, just read Revelation 19, 20, 21, and 22. Okay, let's go. So we're just going to take a look at what the word actually does teach about the 1,000 years on earth. So we all know, I think we should know, 1 Thessalonians 4 shows us that we would meet the Lord in the air. We all know that verse. So we read we're going to meet the Lord in the air. There's nothing whatsoever that says what happens after, where we will go. It just says we meet him in the air. There's not, earth is not even being mentioned in this verse. So, and why would we want to go back to the earth? If you have read your chapters, your chapter 19, and actually you have read about the plagues, the 7 last plagues, you will see what the earth looks like. So do you even want to come back to an earth that looks like that? That is something to consider. Now, the biggest mistake we make is if we study the end time, the second coming of Yeshua, and we only use verses of the Old Testament. Because Old Testament prophecies has to match New Testament prophecies. If they do not mix, if they are somehow different, you're going to have to study why it's a little different than in the Old Testament. So let's go dive into the word and see what it really says. Well, the first thing we need to ask ourselves is, what do we know for sure when it comes to this 1,000-year period in Revelation 20? Because, let's face it, this is the only chapter in the entire Bible that speaks about this period of 1,000 years. Other scriptures in other verses in scripture will have to tell you where we're going to spend this 1,000 years and what we will be doing there. The word, as you will notice, the word peace on earth is nowhere mentioned in this chapter. Only Revelation 5 speaks about reigning on earth. But again, in that verse, no such thing of time or peace. And of course, the Old Testament speaks about the Lord, Yahweh, being king over all the earth in Zechariah 14 verse 9. But again, there in Zechariah, it's not connected to a period of 1,000 years. And Zechariah is talking about the Lord, which refers to the Father. It doesn't refer to the Son. Now, the Old Testament does speak about a period of peace. And people somehow have connected these two things, the time of peace and 1,000 years. They've connected these things and created this concept, this whole new theory. The question is this biblical? So, I hope you can read the verses. If you don't, just send me an email and I will send you all the verses that I'm using and which you are seeing on the screen. So let's take a look at the events mentioned in Revelation 20, which are things that happen at the beginning of the 1,000 years, because there's a beginning that's being described and an end being described. What's in between is also in Revelation 20, but we'll get there. So first of all, we see an angel from heaven, and he's binding Hasatan, Satan, and he's throwing him in the bottomless pits. We can see that in a verse. Now, I believe this binding of Satan is a type of the scapegoat, which receives all the sins of Israel upon him and sent into the wilderness to die. But that's another study, which we will get to in the future. The second thing we see is thrones are being set up where judgment will be held. Very, very important thing to consider, because this is what Revelation 20 is all about. It's about judgment upon the wicked. Where is this judgment taking place? in heaven. Because I put up there the question, where are these thrones? These thrones are taken up in heaven. So, because whenever the Bible mentions thrones in Revelation, it's seen in heaven. Except for chapter 22, because that's after the 1,000 years. That's when the new heaven and earth comes down. So by then it'll be on earth. But before that, the thrones are in heaven. When we read the book of Daniel, the thrones are also in heaven. Now, in order to understand prophecy, we need two books, both books, Daniel and Revelation, to get a complete picture. So what is taking place in this verse? That is the judgment of the wicked. So we're going to talk about a little bit more about the judgment, because when you look at Daniel 7, we see a similar scene of Revelation 20. Similar, but not the same, because in the book of Daniel, the saints, the people of the house of Yah, are being judged. And that is a principle in the Bible. If you read 1 Peter 4, verse 17, it says, judgment begins at the house of God. When you read Ezekiel 9, 3-6, where judgment comes upon his people, he starts at my sanctuary. So the people of God have to be judged first, because they receive their reward when Yeshua comes back. Revelation 20 deals with judgment of the wicked. Daniel 7 deals with the judgment of the saints, the people of Yah. Hopefully you and me. So let's read what Daniel has to say. As I continued to watch, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. And his throne was flaming with fire, and its wheels were all ablaze. And then a fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Now, lots of thousands ministered before him, and judgment was set, and the books were opened. Now, these verses deal with the first judgment, the judgment of the saints. This takes place, by the way, in the time of the little horn. That's the time when a little horn is in power. You can read it in verse 8, 11, and 21. So it's somewhere close in the future that this is happening. It might have already started, and it continues until the time of the little horn. It's also close to the time of Revelation 14, because Revelation 14:7 tells us the hour of his judgment has come. So again, just as there are two resurrections, one of the saints, one of the wicked, thus there will be two judgments. And Daniel 7 talks about the judgments of the saint. But it also shows us that the saints will judge too. We will get to that in part 2 and 3 of this video series. In this scene that we read, we see the Father and the angels are in a court to judge the saints. Now, why with the angels, you may wonder? That's simply because God's people, as the word shows, we have our own angel, and the records, they're keeping record of our life, and the records are now being opened. And although the power of the little horn is very powerful in the end days, it will not last. So that's a good thing to know. In verse 18, we are comforted knowing that the saints will receive the kingdom and possess it forever and ever. Yes. So this is a different phase in judgment. So we have started noticing that judgment has come upon the house of Yah. And in this verse 18, we will see that at some point in the future, we will receive the kingdom and possess this thing. We also see it in verse 22, of course. That is a confirmation of the fact that we will receive, because we are in favor. The word says, and the time came for them to possess the kingdom, which is in the future, of course. And then there's verse 24. That is until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was given to the saints. And the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. So this is the judgment that we read about in Revelation 20. This verse 24 is connected to Revelation 20, because verse 24 says, judgment is given to the saints of the Most High. And that's exactly what will happen in the 1,000-year reign. Judgment will be given to the saints. So yeah, saints are being judged here in the book of Daniel, as Peter said in his first letter. And we know that these thrones are in heaven because, God's throne is in heaven, as we read everywhere throughout the word. The judgment scene is a very important thing to realize, that first the saints will be judged, and then the wicked. And that is what Revelation 20 is dealing with, the judgment of the wicked. So, a few more things that will happen at the beginning of 1,000 years. We see a group of people who lives and reigns with Christ for 1,000 years. They are part of the first resurrections. They are called the blessed ones. We also see a group of people who do not live during these 1,000 years. They are the dead people. How the last people died, you read in chapter 19, verse 15 to 21. And this is called the second death, by the way. The second death will be after the 1,000 years. So, when Jesus returns, he will come with justice and to make war to strike down the nations, as we read in Revelation 19. He will save his servants, yes, but he will kill all the rest. And the earth will be left desolate. The war, however, which is written about in Revelation 19, it will not be a war as we have seen it throughout the ages. Jesus will smite the nations with a sword in his mouth, as we read, meaning he only has to speak the word and it's done. Like the earth was started with the words of Yah, it will end with the spoken words of Yah, of God the Son. So, this was also prophesied in Jeremiah 4, from verse 23, and Jeremiah 25. I'd say go pause and read these verses. That has dual fulfillment. It has fulfillment for the days of Jeremiah and also for us in the end. So, by the way, did you notice that at the end of the book of Revelation, we are no longer called the church or Israel. We are called saints. And that's because we have been blessed. We have been made holy, as we see in verse 5 and 6. And the only thing that reminds us of Israel and the church are the names of the 12 tribes on the gates of the New Jerusalem. and the names of the apostles written on the foundation in the new heavenly Jerusalem. So there will be no more denominations, and all of us will be saints. And that's awesome, because the term saints can be used for us humans, but it can also be used for the angelic host. And we will be like them. So yay. Let's just recap. What have we seen? What is going to happen at the beginning of the 1,000 years? So, angel comes down from the bottomless pit to bind Satan. Thrones are being set up. Judgment will be held. This is very, very important to understand. Revelation 20 deals with judgment. It doesn't deal with 1,000-year peace on earth. It deals with judgment. We see a group of people who live and reign as priests of God with Christ for this period of time. These are called the blessed ones, and they are part of the first resurrection. On such, the second death has no power. So you need to be in that first resurrection. If you're not in the first resurrection, it's not good. And also, we see the group of people who do not live during these 1,000 years. As we read, they are called the rest of the dead. You don't want to be part of that group, trust me. Now, so far, these were the things that were there at the beginning of the 1,000 years, and these are the things at the end of the 1,000 years. So, Satan will be loosed. We read from his bottomless pit. Those who died at the second coming of Jesus, so at the beginning of 1,000 years, and all the unbelievers who ever lived, they will be resurrected, and Satan and the resurrected will prepare themselves for the battle of Gog and Magog to attack the saints who are in the beloved city. However, this would be a lost fight, because we read in the end of the chapter that fire comes down from God out of heaven to destroy them. And them would be Satan, the wicked, and the fallen angels. You can read that in Jude and 2 Peter 2 verse 4. So the end of the world as we know it, before the 1,000 years and after the 1,000 years, is also written in the prophecy of Isaiah 24. I'd say go pause and go to Isaiah 24, read it, and then come back. You will see, if you read the book, if you read Isaiah 24, verse 1 to 20, it deals with the second coming of Yeshua. But verse 20 to 23 deals with the punishment of all the wicked after the 1,000 years. Not just the wicked human beings, but also the wicked angelic host and their leader. So this battle of Satan and his followers of Gog and Magog was actually foreshadowed in Isaiah 24, in which the fallen angels and the wicked kings will be shut up in prison to be visited after many days. Now the Hebrew word for visited, which is pakad, can mean to visit upon, but it also means to be punished. And so taking it in context, the better translation would be, the wicked will be punished. Now, Revelation 21, verse 2 and 10, they show us how the city, by the way, came down from heaven to this earth. Because as you see, the order of events in the book of, or actually in the word, are not always chronological. They just mix and match, and you're going to have to figure out the time frame of the word. So, what we have learned so far is that nowhere In the entire book of Revelation 20, we read about a period of peace on earth. I haven't seen it. If you have, if I missed something, do let me know in the comments or send me an email. But I haven't seen it. So the question is, why not? Well, it's simple, because Yeshua, Jesus, told us where we would spend this 1,000 years. And he also tells us what we will be doing there, because there's things to be done within this 1,000 year. So, if you wish to find out where we will go, and more so, what we will be doing there, please join me in part 2 of this series. Like I said, if you have any questions, comments, whatsoever, please leave them downstairs or send me an email. Click on your subscribe button to get notifications. And for now, Yah willing, I'll see you in part 2. Shalom.